All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Hala Esmail. I'm the Associate Director of Faculty Professional Development with LSU Online and Continuing Education, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. I'd like to begin with a little bit of context. So a group of LSU Online faculty from across the LSU institutions have gotten together to organize a panel series with the goal of equipping faculty with strategies, tools, and effective practices for delivering high quality online education. So we're thrilled to have you join us today for our first panel. Our panelists today are experts in the field and have valuable insights to share on innovative approaches to online education. First, we have Dr. Cheryl Bardales. She's the assistant professor in the Department of Biological Sciences and director of the Center for Opportunity Research and Experiential Learning at LSU Alexandria. Next, please welcome Luke Cashen, Senior Instructor in the Rucks Department of Management, the Flores MBA program at LSU. And also joining us is Dr. Kina, Assistant Professor and Program Coordinator for the Medical Billing and Coding program at LSUE Unis. And for a quick reference, I'm going to enter their names and titles here in the chat so you know who we have here today. Before we begin, I'd like to let everyone know that we are recording this session, so please mute your mic when you're not actively speaking. Also, we plan to reserve about 15 minutes at the end for a Q&A portion. Feel free to use the chat feature to submit your questions throughout today's discussion. My colleague, Jennifer Morissette, will keep her eye on the chat and help facilitate the Q&A portion. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. So I'll start by asking each one of our panelists to please introduce themselves and share how long they've been teaching online and a little bit about the courses they teach. So Dr. Bardales, could you kick things off for us, please?
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be able to share this time with you this morning. I have been teaching online for almost 10 years. I started teaching online for LSUA about 8 years ago, and I originally was an adjunct instructor, online instructor, and then had the opportunity to move to Louisiana, to Alexandria, to join the department full-time, but I still love to teach online. I love to develop courses online, and I'm happy to share some of my experiences with you.
Thank you. Next, Professor Cashen, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and the courses you teach?
Good morning to all. Thank you for allowing me to be with you. I've been in higher ed now 26 years and teaching online for about 8. I teach 2 courses online for our Baton Rouge campus, and that's going to be our BADM 7190, which is in our MBA program. And so students typically are about 2/3 of the way through their MBA degree when they enter the 7190. A handful of them are actually right on the edge of graduation. And then also I teach the capstone course for the undergraduate students in business, which is Management 3830. And so they are in their last roughly 18 hours. It's been exciting. It's been challenging. And again, thank you for allowing me to be with you.
Thank you. And Dr. Sweet.
Hello, I'm Dr. Kina, and I actually have been in the online space for at least 18 years. And in being in the online space, I've taught anything from a first-time college course, HIM, medical billing and coding, HCM. I've done it all. So, and I've built classes, and I've been building classes all this time, and I've seen the changes and I've seen the challenges. Also I am with Louisiana State University at Unis, and I have been here in Unis for almost 5 years, and my program is 100% online based. So I totally I totally run that whole, how to say, program just by itself. So I'm kind of like the one woman show, I guess. But it's great to be here with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sweet. And we're going to talk about some of those changes and challenges that you mentioned. So I'm going to kick things off with our first question to all of our panelists. So the first question is, keeping students engaged and motivated in an online environment can be challenging. What are some of the things you've done in your online course that have helped maintain student interest and engagement? So Dr. Bardales, I'm going to start with you here, if you don't mind sharing some of those strategies.
Absolutely. So I have noticed over the past 10 years of teaching online how much my own approach to teaching online has changed, and I find that it still remains challenging to engage our students online. I am currently teaching both in person and online. In fact, I'm right now teaching the exact same course in person and online. And so I find that to be, they each have their individual challenges. So for our online students, I find that many of our online students who are working jobs, have families, is a situation that I don't always find to be true for my in-person students. But regardless, one of the things that I find helping students to stay motivated is to be really flexible. And I think that's something we probably all do instinctively. I find that our online students, though, may require a little bit more flexibility. Mike, you mentioned you are in Florida and have been affected by the hurricane. I hope everyone is doing well there. But I right now have students who were affected by both Helene and now by Milton. So that flexibility, I think, is even more important in that online environment. In addition to that, one of the things that I have changed, I'd say over the past 7 years, is adding additional interactive content to my online courses. So originally, when I started teaching, I would have not necessarily have videos, lectures. I went from not having those to having video lectures now. I've also started incorporating my own tools, been developing videos using H5P in Moodle. That's been very, very helpful. Students have given me really good feedback about when I embed questions into that material, and then not just embedding questions, but also giving them that live feedback. So when they select an answer that's correct or incorrect, they get that immediate feedback. I find that that's been also very, very helpful. Additionally, I find that students really appreciate when they see those real world connections to their studies, to their career studies. And I've recently, within the past year, really started incorporating more case studies into my coursework. And by building those case studies using tools like H5P, students, I can present the material, I can embed videos in those tools, and then also embed the questions. I've been getting really good feedback about that, so I plan on continuing to write case studies and incorporate case studies into all of my coursework.
Those are all really great strategies. Thank you, Bardales, for sharing. Professor Cashen, I saw you nodding your head over there. So anything you'd like to share on your end?
I have to scratch off all the comments she took. But I think those are brilliant comments. For me, in terms of keeping students engaged, you have, to me, two components. You have the course component, right, where they interact with the material that we have set up. And then, of course, you have the component of the asks that we have as instructors, which could be through exam sets, presentations, whatever that might be, case assessments. So I kind of view those, again, they're very connected, but in terms of the face of the course, I am very, this is, again, year 26 for me. I'm also besides, my PhD in the strategy area, I'm also a corporate strategy consultant now. And so for me, they need the relevance. with the MBA program, these individuals are here to either move up their organization or to move out and up their organization. So the program in which I teach, it has to be very, very relevant. And by all means, I think all programs need to be, but that's a very big issue. Why are we talking about these things in business? How do they meaningfully create value for the organization? And it's really a very multidisciplinary effect in business. And so I really have to connect every single comment, whether it's a video, whether it's an exercise, whether it's a bit of feedback, to how does it allow them to make better decisions as managers. I also, what I allow them to do is when I give them feedback on their exams, I often have additional questions for them and then ask them to then come back with feedback. And look, it doesn't have to be formal. Even if that's, they all have my cell phone, even if it's just a conversation about how they're doing things at work. So I really try to challenge them that way to say, okay, tell me how you think it works in your business, or how would you apply what we talked about in our business, in your business. So I do believe my approach has changed. I do believe that I have moved more away from a textbook and more towards my own experiences and the experiences of corporate America around me. And for me, it goes back to consistently stating why you need to know this, right? It's important that you understand that this component of this course is relevant here, right, in your corporate life. I know that I have quite a few individuals who are transitioning out of the military, so they have a very different mindset, and I have to bring what corporate America is to them and for them to understand that. Also, what I consistently do, as in my lectures, I always tell them we're going to build a story about strategy. And so it is my attempt to consistently tell them that every single component, every single module, every single discussion that we're going to have adds a piece. And if you are missing a piece, then you are missing the ability to create value for your organizations. And so they're all connected that way. I really attempt to keep them engaged through not only with my videos and my experiences and hopefully my passion about the material of how we create, great decisions for organizations, but also in group work. And I assign not just individual work, but also group work, where then they have to come together, divide the work, hold each other accountable. Certainly I'm there if I need to step in. And then also what I find important is that the more it goes, the more I design my own material in terms of the cases that I want to present to them. And I tell you this for a reason. Most strategic management textbooks and the examples that they offer tend to be B2C, business to consumers, right? They use examples about Walmart. They use examples about retailing. The difference is when I have individuals coming into an MBA program, most of them work in B2B, right? And so they work in a business to business environment. So they have a very difficult time, I find, with the traditional texts of connecting to the material. And so what I do, I've kind of moved to where they are and writing my own cases about business to business interactions, which is not something you typically find in a strategy textbook. So I think that piques their interest. They tell me they appreciate that more and more. And so I think those are a lot of my experiences, especially at the master's level.
Thank you, Professor Cashen. Dr. Sweet, I'd like to turn things over to you to give you the opportunity of what are some strategies you implement in your classes to keep students engaged and motivated online?
Well, first of all, I want to say that all those are good strategies that they've introduced you to. I'm gonna just kind of jump on my humanistic side for a little bit. And what I tend to do for my people is I'll do weekly or bi-weekly little emails or announcements, if you will. And in those announcements, I tend to bring in material, and you kind of make a string of this is what I'm asking now. I need, you go find this answer. But at the same time, I also realized that for the people or the students that we take in, a lot of times you'll find that life happens. And that flexibility that she was talking about is very, very real. And I send what's called check-in email. And what I do is I check in with my students and they love it. I check in with my students. I come from a place of I've never been a person, and I tell them up front, I don't sugarcoat nothing. So don't ask me to share your share. But at the same time, I want you to be professional and I want you to remain with your professional composure. So, but I tend to ask them to respond to me, to let me know what's going on, in life. And they seem to resonate with that very well. And it allows them not only to ask me something or tell me something, we can always refer back to the schoolwork that we're talking about for that particular week. Another thing that I like to do, just to kind of give them, and when I start my emails, I tell them, I say, well, I realize that everybody has a whole lot going on. We had Taco Tuesday, and now guess what? We're going to do a little gaming. And I say, I know everybody likes gaming, right? So I'll put Quizlet is like my best friend. I can create different things in Quizlet. It can come as, I can create different little games with them that can be interactive for them. And that's another thing that I like to really put in, because it kind of takes them down a notch, and not necessarily you have this bulk of material that you have to learn, but I always tell them you take it in small chunks. And when you taking it in small chunks, you can actually digest it better. And I have my little mantras and my and my little representations of those things that I go through, and I put them in, you may put them in the class, in the actual class, or you change up things a little bit. So that's what I like to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Sweet, for sharing. So I heard some really great strategies, the importance of being flexible, and highlighting the relevance. I saw in the chat somebody shared not only what's in it for them, but also what's in it for us. Thank you, Professor DuPont, for sharing that. So integrating things like interactive components and real world applications. Professor Cashen, I'm gonna call on you for this next question that we have up here. I know you've each kind of mentioned a little bit about how you've adapted your courses over time. So the question here is, what changes have you seen in students' needs and expectations over time, and how have you adapted your courses and teaching to better meet those needs? So Dr. Cashen, if you'd like to add on to what you've already mentioned.
Right. So certainly the material has changed, and but I find that the handling of the course has fundamentally changed over the years. And for whatever reason that might be, we can chalk it up to increased demands that students have on their lives. But when it comes to the undergraduate course that I teach, the capstone strategy class for the undergrads, I find that if I am not constantly reminding, if I am not constantly connecting, if I am not constantly probing, then I'm going to end up losing a few individuals. And I don't want to do that, because they're obviously there for a reason. So you certainly cannot be all things to all people, but being flexible, accommodative, and reasonable, and having a heart is, I think, a base expectation for faculty to have. Because just like with our lives, I remember mid-semester, losing a parent, and so I expect, certain accommodations from my students for them to give me a couple of days to step out the classroom. So I have found unequivocally that they appreciate that. And the more humanity that we insert into what we do as instructors, I think we're just going to have better outcomes. And I think that's going to meaningfully improve the equity of our brand here at LSU. I find with the MBAs, they're balancing, many of them have families, many of them have very significant professional obligations. They're all around the world, very significant enrollment with the military. And so for us to not be accommodative is, I believe, not servicing students well. So that, I think, is a very, very important issue for me. And I find it allows me to connect better to our students. And I get more and more, look, I appreciate this. This means a lot to me. Thank you for checking up on me. And also, I find in organizations we're doing arguably so much more with less. And so I've seen over the years where I've even had that feedback initially where, man, this course is a lot for me to handle Friday through Sunday. And so my response to that is, well, your module is 7 weeks. Your module is not 7 weekends. And so proactively ahead of time, I tell them, look, I understand the obligations, but it's a 7-week module and not a 7-weekend module. So you're going to have to pace yourself 30, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, depending upon, when things are due. Now, if you certainly want to leave it all for the weekend, essentially your weekend belongs to me. And I don't think that's the right thing to do because there is an information processing component with higher level, with all of our disciplines. But, when I think about my discipline in terms of strategy, there's a lot to digest: corporate finance, accounting, marketing, management, those kind of things. And it's often not very intuitive. And so that's one thing, along with the humanity component, managing their expectations coming in. And I've had a handful of them tell me, thank you so much for that email, because it allows me now to pace myself. And you were right. I would have not done too well if I would have let this happen just on a Friday through Sunday.
Yeah, Dr. Sweet, I know you mentioned some of those similar strategies that Professor Cashen just shared about reaching out to those students and how much they love it and appreciate it. And I've heard from faculty over the years, sometimes they're even really surprised by it. Like, oh, you noticed. Would you like to share, Dr. Sweet, any additional changes that you've noticed in students' needs and expectations and how you've adapted your courses to meet those needs?
Well, when it comes to students, online students, I think we look at it a little bit differently now. Online students, that, okay, these are the students who can't sit in the classroom all day long. But you also notice that a lot of these students are not necessarily supported students. We don't find the culture supports them. It doesn't allow for them to expand themselves into education. So, and because a lot of people will tell them, well, why are you doing this? And I find that students give that feedback and they say, well, so-and-so told me I would never make it. I would never do this. I'd never be able to finish this. And that's what you find in the culture has more change to every man for himself and not necessarily the village that we used to come up in. Does that make sense? Also, there's not been enough emphasis on completion. And when I say there's not been enough emphasis on completion, even children in high school, if you look at the children in high school, they're not necessarily telling them how to complete something, it's how fast we can get it, and or pushing them through. And I think that culture stays with them when they hit the doors of the collegiate world, and you sit there and you say, well, Well, what happened, why is completion no longer important? They don't put that in a category of importance. So, and also another thing I noticed, as far as how education is valued, how do we actually move around that when, education isn't valued as much as it used to? Their goal is not necessarily always to get the diploma or get the degree. For some, it's more of, this is a way I can survive for now.
Thank you for sharing those observations. Dr. Sweet and Dr. Bardales, I want to call on you there to see if there's additional insights you'd like to share with us on this point.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I really appreciated the commentary that has already happened. And Professor Cashen, I very much agree that you mentioned, not just being accommodating, but, having a heart is really an essential requirement for us, to meet our students' needs. And I mentioned earlier, and this is something that I do in all of my classes, but especially in my online classes, is, trying to be aware of what things that my students might be undergoing, whether it's something, more significant, such as recent weather events, or, you mentioned about, losing a parent or something like that. And one of the things that I always do is when students reach out to me, with a particular issue, the first thing I do is I thank them. I thank you for reaching out to me. Thank you for letting me know the challenges that you're facing. I think that, providing that validation that I want to hear what it is you're going through, your challenges, and I want to work with you, to make sure that you have what you need to be successful. I cannot emphasize that enough to my students, as I want you to be successful, and we have to work together to find, whatever it is that you need to be successful. So in addition to like some other, changing needs and expectations of our students, I do find that, our students, even though they're online, they still have that expectation that there's going to be interaction, not just with me, but with their peers. So in order to, address that observation that I've made, is that I really do try to integrate, more collaborative activities into my online classes. And I mean, like, maybe more so than discussion forums. Dr. Cashen, you mentioned group projects. I agree. Group projects are still incredibly important, especially in our online classes. And we know, students globally don't really appreciate group projects until maybe later on in their careers. And then forming those groups and having successful groups in an online environment is really challenging. And so I've implemented a couple of different tools that I think have really helped my students embrace that group project in an online format. So, Moodle offers some really great opportunities for students to interact in a peer-to-peer environment. When I introduce a group project, I give students the opportunity to select, self-select into a particular group. Moodle gives us that opportunity. It allows me to set the size of the groups, I find that to be very helpful. Giving students, the leeway to form the, whatever way they need to communicate with each other, can communicate with each other. I encourage them to draw on the individual, expertise of each other in the group. If you're doing a group project, I don't expect everyone to maybe do the background research, or maybe someone is better at creating the PowerPoint. Usually my group projects is a video project, so they have to, get together to video. Somebody might be better with the video editing. And so I really encourage them, much like if they were in the workplace where a team is each working towards their individual strengths. I try to ensure that they recognize what each other's strengths are, And I found that's been very helpful. I get a lot less. I did all the work and no one else, contributed in my group. I mean, I still get that, but not as much as when I encourage students to work towards their strengths in that type of project. I also am a very big proponent of helping our students practice that peer review process. So when I do a group project, there are multiple levels of feedback that goes on. So I of course, provide feedback to the groups. I provide feedback individually to each individual in the group. But then I also expect every person in the group to provide feedback to every other person in the group, as well as themselves. I provide, rubrics, very clear rubrics that they can use. And I expect them to not just evaluate their peers, but also to evaluate themselves. And I find that to be very, students are very insightful when you give them the opportunity to, hey, tell me how you think you did in that particular group project. Students are very honest. They'll say, well, I didn't really do a great job with this. And I find those very, very useful. So providing students that opportunity to provide feedback, giving them a clear structure, so a rubric that they can use, I find that to be very helpful. Dr. Sweet, you mentioned, education, not being maybe valued as much as it used to be. And, I do agree. I see that there's more, that this is an business exchange, in a way, no more so than just, when I went to school, I was there to get an education. Now it's more, how is this going to help me get a job, or how is this going to help me, improve in my career aspects? And so, one of the ways I address, that changing needs or changing expectations of our students is I'm very, I'm very explicit about, this is why I'm asking you to do this group project, because you are going to have to work in a team as a group, in whatever career you're going on, and there are always going to be the same situations you run into in a group project in class. You're going to have those same situations in the workforce. So let's learn some strategies together in this, what I consider to be a more friendly environment, that they can, then take with them and apply into the workforce. So I do spend a lot of time in all of my classes now, iterating how I think what we're doing is going to be important, either to their specific career or to more general career, whether it be presenting, communicating, working in a teamwork. And I find that making those explicit connections between the education and the career, the model that we seem to be seeing now is very, it's just very important for us to be explicit, so that they know we recognize that you're here, to get more than just an education. You're here to create that meaningful career that you're looking for, and we can help you get there. So.
Thank you, Dr. Bardales. I saw some common themes and elements across all of your responses there. The importance of having that heart and understanding students and having that empathy, and also managing expectations, especially for students who aren't or don't have a lot of experience in online learning, taking online courses. Professor Cashen, you mentioned letting students know this is a 7-week course, not a 7-weekend course. I wrote that down. I think students can be kind of taken aback, especially if they're not accustomed to the accelerated format of these shorter terms, and also managing expectations. Dr. Bardales, in terms of engagement, they're not going to be sitting at their computer all by themselves, not talking to anybody for 7 weeks, but there's opportunities for discussions and group work, and how those experiences will help equip them for their, in the field, in their careers, or as they get into the workforce. I'm keeping a close eye on the time. I see we have about almost 20 minutes left, so we're going to quickly get through the last couple of questions. And I see there's quite a few that have been submitted in the chat and some chatter going on in there. So my next question here, and Dr. Sweet, I'm going to start with you here, is what gaps do you still see in online education practices that we all as educators and leaders of our online community can help address? So there's been these changes over the years, but what gaps are you still seeing?
Well, the first thing is the lack of like personalized learning experiences, because a lot of times when it comes to online learning, you know, we're not sitting there and we're not necessarily talking to the student. So, and then a lot of people like to do a one size fits all. There is no one size fits all. You know, like when you sit there and you say, well, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to tell them to go ahead and do a discussion. And we're going to do the discussion like this. And we're not going to give too much feedback on the discussion. We're going to just allow them to do interaction. That's where things start to get kind of hairy, because there is no one size fits all. You have to think about how everybody learns. You have to think about where can I direct that student? When it comes to the digital literacy portion of it, a lot of our online students don't know, some of them don't even know how to turn the computer on. Can I say that? I've had students, literally, they have signed up for classes at LSU online, and next thing you know, I get a phone call and they say, I've never done that before. I'm really not tech savvy. So what do you do with that? You know, so there's a gap there. How do we prepare them for what's coming next? Also, when it comes to faculty development, a lot of times you'll find that people will throw people in a classroom, any classroom, whether it's on ground or whether it's online, and they don't have the proper training. And when I say the proper training, there's no professional development that goes on previous to them actually entering that classroom, no more than to tell them, let me show you how to navigate the class a little bit, you know. So that's a gap that we definitely need to fill, because we're doing a disservice not only to the student, but to the faculty member. And another thing I do not like, I like this question. Another thing that I do not like or do not care for is when we disseminate information. We need to disseminate information not only to the faculty, the full-time faculty, but we need to disseminate information to the adjuncts as well, because they need to be a part of the equation. And when we don't allow for things that do not include adjuncts, you know, that's where I start to kind of get a red line. Because we're all in this together, and we have to show it amongst ourselves before we can actually show it to the student. I quit. I can stay on this question all day.
Thank you, Dr. C. Dr. Bardales, would you like to share your insights on this topic?
Yes, thank you. Really quickly, since I know we're running out of time, I have two thoughts. First, you know, Dr. Sweet, I absolutely agree with you about digital literacy still, you know, being a concern. So I teach biology, and one of the challenges that I've been dealing with in teaching online is my students needing to learn laboratory techniques. So, you know, and we know it's very difficult to teach laboratory type techniques, you know, in an online environment. And I know I don't have a lot of time to go through it today, but I encourage anyone who is interested in some of the things that I've been doing in collaboration with LSU Online and our amazing designers at LSU Online is mixing a mix of things that students can do at home versus things that they can do in the online environment in terms of simulations, interactives. I think, but that adds to the level of, that digital literacy gap. So I am expecting my students to be able to learn and use a wide variety of online tools and simulations and 3D models, and that can be a challenge. So providing that necessary support for students to interact with it in a way with material that they may not have done so. I find that to be, something that I continue to work on. And then quickly, the second thing I wanted to mention about a gap in online education is really just still ensuring the integrity of our assessments, the integrity of our assignments. Cheating, academic dishonesty, can be, in some cases easier to facilitate in a remote setting. And so I still find that to be a challenge. And then of course now, artificial intelligence that's a whole nother panel that we can have, of course, discussing about how that has made challenges for all of us. I don't have an answer to all of those other than I encourage, I use artificial intelligence. I have to learn how to use it. I have to learn how to incorporate it into my classes, and encourage my students to as well. I think that's a huge gap that has opened up for all of us, that we need to be proactive, in so that we can navigate these new technologies for our students, in the future. So yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Bardales. I see some heads nodding across the gallery view here. Professor Cashen, would you like to close us out with this question?
Yeah, I mean, I want to echo a lot of these comments here. For me, especially in my master's program, they do a lot of writing, and I want to know their thoughts, because in corporations, and it's not a multiple choice setting. There is value in certainly testing that way, but the integrity component, I find, is such a critical hurdle for me to overcome. And I try to, in my welcome video, I try to, in my syllabus, I do it at the front of every exam set. I do it when I tell them, hey, look, the exam set is posted. Don't go on Chegg. Don't do this. Don't. And I still get responses that they go on the internet and they give me things that are complete garbage. And I ask them, and it's very infrequent. I must admit, it's very infrequent, but it creates so much time. Tell me why, between the readings, the video lectures, you reaching out to me even proofreading exam sets, drafts, why you feel just a quick copy paste over here is appropriate. And that's the one part that I think where it's such an easy thing to do, to enter it into an AI, to enter it into Chegg, to enter it into, or someone else went through the program. And I tell them, look, I keep all the work. I look through all the work. I know what's on Chegg. I've even paid Chegg. I've seen it. That's one thing. Number two, you want an MBA. Tell me why. Tell me, what is it about an MBA? Because an MBA is a very hot topic. It's a very hot degree. It's been for quite some time. Tell me what it is, because an MBA in theory is really designed to build a generalist in business and not so much a specialist. And so sometimes they're not quite sure why they're doing a program. And I really think we need to be very clear in communicating that with them about, is this the right fit for you? Also, what I find interesting is that there is all this work you can get and this help you can get before you jump online. You go through Quality Matters, all this other training. But on the back end, and don't get me wrong, LSU has some phenomenal resources and about how to do things better. My course designer was, A+. I'm not sure if, Lynn is on this call, A+, and always assisting. But if we were able to assign maybe some mentors of people who are actually doing, who have kind of tripped and fallen at times and say, look, here's where I just face planted on something. Don't repeat this, or if you're going to do that, make sure you manage it this way. Then I think that would be helpful. And because there's times where I just wish I could ask someone who's been doing it, hey, look, if you really just really, you feel like you're not connecting, and it doesn't have to be in the same discipline. I mean, there's nothing wrong with, a business person reaching out to a biology faculty member. I believe that. And also, last but not least, I think we're not short on communicating with people, and we do that through tons of different ways, mostly emails, this, that, and the other. But how do we know that they're really understanding what we want them to do or what they need to do from a timeline perspective or this, that, and the other? And like I tell my students especially with strategy implementation, communication does not equal understanding. And so how do we do a better job of matching our communication as instructors and our, as program managers with their understanding, where we become more effective in that?
Thank you, Professor Cashen. I can't write fast enough. A lot of great topics that have come up. So things like student preparedness, faculty professional development, digital literacy, personalized learning experiences. So certainly a lot of room for improvement, a lot of things that we can kind of focus on as we consider how we can improve our online teaching and online offerings. We're running close up on time. I do have one more kind of question to close us out here. So in 1 minute or less, and Dr. Bardales, I'm going to start with you. In 1 minute or less, what advice would you offer to faculty members who are new to online teaching or looking to revitalize their courses?
Absolutely. Thank you. So I would say first, start simple. Start with simple tools, simple techniques, and then just build gradually from there. Every time I teach an online class, my idea is to improve it. And that improvement comes from asking for feedback, ask for feedback from my students. I've gotten into including these not the instruction, not these surveys that students do at the end of the class. I put my own in there, and I really emphasize how I want to improve this course, and I need you to help me do that. And then one other thing I would add is I think it is so important that we continue to include different types of assessments in our online classes. So I will always have very frequent low stakes assessments, quizzes, assignments, things that they can complete multiple times, without penalty. I find that's been really an important part of my online community, is not making my course based on, two summative assessments that, determines their final grade. In fact, I rarely go more than 40 or 50% of their final grade is a summative type of assessment. Building in those frequent assessments and building in those assignments, I think, are incredibly important.
Thank you, Dr. Bardales. Professor Cashen.
I would not underestimate the time commitment that it takes to do this well, because there is a lot of trial and error at times. And so I would set time aside in your schedule to really dedicate, in your day, to really addressing what you need to address and do things well. Also, I would, as you change, and I echo that comment, as you change things, there is a tendency to go, well, let me change these 5 things, right? And then I find I get overwhelmed with that, right? I'm going to try a new way to do this. I'm going to shoot some new videos in terms of how I do this. I'm going to give feedback differently here. And then at that point, if you're successful, my question is, tell me why? Or if you're not successful, tell me again, what do you think it is? And so there's nothing wrong with saying these 1 or these 2 things, good, let's test drive it. Then let's test drive it. And so do that in small pieces. And then last but not least, the flexibility. You have to be flexible, not a doormat, but you have to be flexible and meet them often where they are in terms of their needs, and try to be accommodative. Please do not be customer-led, be customer-focused. And I think that's a real component. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Sweet.
All right. So the biggest thing I think would be to make sure that you're leveraging your technologies. Because when I think about the tools that I use in the classroom, for instance, we use EHRs, real EHRs, active EHRs, and we use authentic patient records. So when I say authentic patient records, they're of course they're didactic. You know, they've already taken out some of the stuff, but at the same time, it gives the student an opportunity to see what truly happens, or what records that we receive to actually code. And don't be afraid to try something. That's the bottom line. You don't be afraid to try, because it's amazing how many things happen when it's something that you didn't think would actually work.
Thank you, Dr. Sweet. And I think that circles back really well to what Dr. Bardales shared when she said start simple. All right, we have about 8 minutes left of our time here today. So Jennifer, have there been, I noticed a few questions have been posted in the chat. Some have been answered. There's been, looks like some great discussion here. But are there any questions that that we can pose here to our panelists?
Yeah, I think we have one. This would be for Dr. Sweet. I think it was the very first question actually that was asked, and you had mentioned that you make a point of connecting with the students and doing like a check-in email or some sort of announcement. Do you mind kind of discussing a little bit more about your specific approach and how you do that? And how do you make sure that you're balancing your time, and also depending on if all the students are like copied on an email or something like that, how do you maintain privacy with the students that you're reaching out to?
Well, basically, the thing of it is, when I send out a check-in email, of course, it's going to be a mass email. But at the same time, I ask each of them, I said, can you please answer me? And I tell them, please respond. I put it in big bold letters, please respond. And I put it, you know, it's in a dark black or dark red or whatever. And I say, please respond. So once they respond to me, depending on what they say, I'll be honest with you, I'll give you a call. And that allows me to delve more into their situation at that particular time. You have to allow yourself to, I'm not calling them to be nosy, I'm calling to find out how is this going to affect your performance in this class. And we try to come up with a plan going forward as to how we are going to set things up. Also, when it comes to those check-in emails, now, if I see somebody going south and, you know, they hadn't checked in for so many days, well, I go ahead and I send the individual check-in email, because as an online teacher, believe it or not, when Mr. Cashen said, you have to know how to budget your time, well, a lot of it is going to be outreach. And that's what you have to realize. That's what online learning is. If I'm not necessarily reaching out with information, I'm reaching out with questions that make sense and that you can respond to and let me know how you're doing and what I need to do for you. Because I straight up ask them, tell me what I can do for you to help you. Because a lot of times we don't have those answers. Some may tell you, well, I just need a little more time. And we work on it. And I hold them accountable. I put sticky notes on your friend. I put a sticky note on the computer, call this one on this day. I want accountability, because I'm going to hold them accountable. I didn't want to blur the lines, did I?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sweet. Another question for those of you who may be teaching in the summer. You know, these are the accelerated courses, even more accelerated than the regular LSU online terms. So how do you all navigate the shorter accelerated sessions and make it manageable for the online population?
Well, anybody?
Oh, I mean, thanks, Jennifer. That's a really great question. And I find that it's one I continue to struggle with myself. When I'm teaching a shorter course, I find that it actually, my courses improve because I take a closer eye to what is it that I really need these students to learn, and making sure that it's streamlined in a way that they can learn that in the amount of time they have. I would say that's one thing. The second one is being upfront and clear right from the beginning. This is a 5-week class that you still need to learn the same amount of material as a 16-week class. And so if you are taking 2 or 3 5-week classes, you need to consider whether you're setting yourself up for success or not. And so I'm very clear throughout the entire class that yes, this is hard, yes, this is a lot, but they have to manage their expectations with their time. Not many people can do more than 1 or 2 5-week classes at a time. So
For me, it becomes even more important that the feedback is given quicker on assignments. I really attempt to give feedback, and some of our MBA courses get to be over 100 in enrollment, which is manageable through using groups. But in that 5-week module, you really, as an instructor, in my opinion, have to have a mental commitment to the minute things come in, you have got to get it back out. Because if you're asking them on a second exam set or a second quiz or a second assignment or wherever that might be, I find it's unfair for them to have this, okay, here's my work, it needs to be assessed, hanging out there. But then you're already saying, hey, you better start, taking care of this second assignment or whatever it might be. You really have to commit to getting that out. And I mean, so in terms of, I'll get to that 2 or 3 days. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. I mean, you got to put some things on hold as an instructor. That's my opinion.
I think there's one more question, but if anybody needs to hop off, feel free. I will be sending an email with a recording and some additional information. But Jen, do you want to go ahead and share that last question that came through?
Yeah, the last question is if you have any recommendations or considerations when designing courses that may be taught by a different faculty member or an adjunct coming in to teach the course. Any advice?
Well, if I know a different faculty member is going to end up teaching the class, which for all of ours do, for medical billing and coding, I try to stay, I try not to be biased on the information that's actually in the course, especially in the design. And, I try to stay above board when it comes to what we're actually learning in the field, because we want to try to actually implement those things as well that would allow a person to actually put their own thoughts into what's being taught. And I also like to tell my especially my new faculty, go into the discussion. When you're in the discussion, talk about things that are not necessarily the discussion topic, and talk about things that are not. Because we can talk about things that are umbrella, but at the same time, we can still talk about things that are point. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Dr.
Thanks.
Sweet. Jen, was there anything else?
I don't see any other questions.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for this very insightful panel. Of course, a huge and special thank you to our panelists. We do ask that you take a few minutes to share your feedback to help us improve future events and offerings. Again, I'll be sending an email that'll include the recording and a link to the survey. But if you have a few minutes, feel free to scan this QR code and submit your feedback. Thank you again for your participation, for your engagement, for your interest, and we hope to see you at future events.